Love that, Allie. That they can do hard things. Important lesson. As you guys are hopping on, I want to invite you to think about on this brisk Friday morning, a lesson that you want to teach your child soon, and drop it in the chat. Having integrity, being a person of your word. Love it. Responsibility. And just to, thanks for sharing that, Jalea. Just to broaden the possibility of what you could put in the Zoom. Also think about concrete things or skills or abilities that you might want to teach your child, like washing dishes or babysitting. Leading by example. Valerie, is that you? It's listed as Maddie, is that right? Time management, cooking a meal. Kristen, your daughter already knows how to cook a meal. Time management with an exclamation point. Kindness. Got it, Val. Appreciation of their siblings. Come on. That's a good one. More responsibility with keeping their place neat. Cooking, time management. Great. Well, it's 8:45. We'll go ahead and jump in. I think a few folks will hop on as we continue this conversation. For those of you who just hopped on, the prompt and invitation to you is to think about a lesson that you want to teach your child soon. I want to share a story. This is Oswin and me up in Arlington, Massachusetts, about, it was 4 years ago, so December 2016. So he's gotten taller since then and older. And it was a December Saturday morning, 30 degrees, which for Arlington, Massachusetts was not too bad, as some of you know. And he had a soccer game, and he was dressed up for that. He played for the Boston Soccer Stars, which is the jersey that you saw. He had a game that morning, and it was 9v9, and it was 90 minutes. And this was actually new for him. He was kind of stepping up into an older age group. His previous teams had been, I think, 7v7, and they played 60 minutes. At this age, they went up to a full 90 minutes, 2 45-minute halves. And this particular game, the team that they played, there's a large Brazilian population in Boston, and they played this team with 100% relocated Brazilian boys, and they played rough. And this was the first time that Oz had ever played in competitive soccer against some other boys that played as rough as these boys. And so I was watching just as a dad on the sidelines, and I was taking note of how just the tenor of this game was different than the roughness levels of other games. And when I say rough in soccer, if you don't know, that's bumping shoulders, potentially tripping, running into people, fighting for the ball, using your arms sometimes, some of which is legal in soccer, some of which is not legal. But the referee was not making as many calls as you might expect, or as other referees would. So this referee was like, okay with a rough game of soccer, and not all referees are, but this one was. And I thought, as I was watching this game, like, this is going to be interesting because this is a first for Oz on many different levels. they ended up losing 3-2. And Oz is a competitive person. And we got in the car, and he said, I was asking him about the game, and he's like, yeah, we lost because of the ref. That was his summary. I asked him, I was like, well, what happened? What was the game like for you? And he was complaining. So we lost because of the ref. And he was feeling super frustrated because he felt like it was out of his control. He felt like it was the ref's fault. And he felt like the other team was too rough. And so I thought, hey, as a dad, here's a moment to teach a lesson. And there was two things I wanted to teach. One was, hey, soccer can be tough, and I played soccer all my life, and soccer can absolutely be tough and rough. And then two was that refs vary in what they allow. Some refs are very lenient on rough play, and others are not at all. They're very strict. And I wanted to teach those two lessons. And so I basically just had a conversation with him in the car about those things. And I was trying those. That was what I wanted him to understand, was that soccer can be rough, and that refs can vary in what they allow. And what prompted me to, give this lesson was his frustration and his, conclusion that we lost because of the ref. I was sort of saying, as a dad, I was like, I don't want him to have a victim mentality. And so I want to help him deepen his understanding of the soccer game and think through how in the future, he might navigate another such game. Well, any guesses as to the result of my lesson? I'll tell you.
He fell on deaf ears. He wasn't interested in hearing Daddy's lesson.
He no longer liked soccer.
All possibilities. After my diatribe, Oswin said at the end of all that, he said, yeah, Dad, we lost because of the ref. So I want to ask y'all, what was most and least effective about my brilliant car ride lesson? What do you think? And I'll just invite folks to come up mute and share. I'm open to the feedback, y'all. It's not going to hurt my feelings.
I think the least effective might have been the timing.
And why is that?
Because immediately after something happens, like on the car ride home, emotions are still high and it's hard to look at something objectively. I think if you wait until kids are in a better mood and they're kind of more even keeled, then they are a lot more receptive to speaking about things objectively. I feel like his emotions probably came into it.
Okay, so that was the least effective thing, was not timing. Anybody agree? Or I'm sorry, go ahead.
I actually think that your 90, just the length probably of your conversation, not like how long you went into it. Sometimes I go into you go into this, I have this great amount of information I need to share with you and it's really great, but it's too much. And they don't hear it because the emotions are too high. So it needs to be short and sweet.
Krista, do you think do you think my conversation with him was 90 minutes?
No, at first I did actually, but then as I read through it, then I realized that the game was 90 minutes. So.
Got it. Yeah. Game was 90, but yeah, my conversation with him in the car was probably, we were 15 minutes from this field. So it's probably a 12-minute situation.
So you did way better done, because I probably would have gone into a 90-minute
Fair enough. Does anyone disagree? Does anyone think actually the timing was brilliant because it was right after the game?
Well, I was just going to say, I know with my kids and with myself, sometimes the issue is not the issue. So he might have said the refs made us lose the game, but in reality, he's just bummed that they lost the game. And he's trying to shift it to somebody other than himself. So sometimes I think even when the response is, yeah, the refs were unfair, sometimes what you've actually said is there and it's simmering. And sometimes it takes a while for the kids to but I think sometimes putting it out there and then just letting them receive it in their own timing can be effective.
That's good. Sometimes the issue is not the issue. Other thoughts? The most and least effective thing about this car ride lesson for me?
I think. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that seeing refs vary in what they allow probably left him feeling a little bit helpless in an area where, you know, they are required as kids to follow the rules. And for him, he may have received that as well, but you know, the refs have the ability to be subjective. And that, you know, may have made him feel less in control than he already felt.
Oof, that's deep. So that gets to his sense of justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I'm not hearing any most effective things about my car ride lesson. I mean, come on, y'all. Like, was there anything good about this approach?
So I was just going to share that conversely, I thought it was great that you brought up the elephant in the room in case, you know, sometimes kids need a little prodding to share their emotions. And so the fact that you brought it up to him and shared some of your thoughts with him allowed him to kind of think more deeply about what happened. And just like the other parent said, sometimes when we speak to kids, they respond in one way, but then they marinate on it. And then later on, you'll see like their actions show that your words really do get through.
Thank you for the kind words, Kathy. Any other thoughts on the anything else that was most and least effective about this lesson?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Valerie. So what stood out to me was the fact that you said it was said that we lost because of the ref. And I just kind of feel like there wasn't a self-reflection or self-reflective moment. And you immediately, the blame was immediately placed on someone else. And for me, I kind of would have approached that like, what did you do? And what could you have done better to maybe, get more points or win or something like that. Like, I feel like that was kind of an out immediately instead of just saying I always say, you have to take personal responsibility for yourself first, regardless. So I would have immediately asked, hey, what could you have done? Or what did you do? Or what could you have improved on in the future?
That's good, Valerie. So another least effective thing about my lesson was actually it might not have been as helpful to teach these principles and instead to actually focus more on personal responsibility and agency and what he could have done to make a difference. That's great. Any final thoughts before I move on?
Tyler, I was going to say something similar. This is Lindsay.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, that I think was it Valerie that just spoke?
Yep.
Okay. To Valerie's point about personal ownership, I also think that rather than agreeing that it was all the ref's fault, because you had other lessons to talk through, but giving him the sense that you see where he was coming from with it, that the refs could have maybe called a few other things, but that didn't necessarily cause them to lose the game. And just kind of how like in football, we all blame when the kicker misses the kick. The team doesn't lose because of the kicker. The team loses for multiple reasons. And so just kind of thinking, well, maybe it was partly the ref's fault, but what are the other pieces of ownership pie that we can talk about that would be yours or other teammates to talk through? And it can't be all one party's fault when we're talking about a team effort.
Yeah, that's good. So maybe even starting the conversation with empathy and active listening and saying, hey, man, I can see why this would be frustrating. And you're right. Maybe in some points the ref, missed the mark. and they're imperfect
Right.
all the time.
Yeah.
And then pivoting from there, that's good. Just to challenge this group one more time, like, is there anything that you would find like actually effective about this car ride lesson that hasn't been said?
This is Brian speaking, and I actually think it was effective because what I've learned with my kids sometimes there is like a delayed reception of what I was talking about or the conversation that we had, and sometimes what I do is I revisit later, not from a teaching perspective, but more so just to see if they feel any different about the subject matter that we talked about. Because like everybody said, the emotions are high at that time. But sometimes I look at it as like a seed. Like you plant a seed and then later on, you kind of see how that seed is growing in reference to the situation. And the reality of life is there are always going to be situations and circumstances that come to kind of try to derail you sometimes. And you can't really control things outside of yourself. You can just control how you respond to it.
Mm.
So I think it was actually, good.
Yeah, that your
Could y'all hear me?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Your point reminds me of the Valerie's personal responsibility point. And I also kind of hear you saying like the timing of it, to address it, before it gets, forgotten or lost, is something effective. What we're doing here, we're sort of the theme of today's parent coffee, and I've got mine. I don't know if you have yours, but and thank you for accommodating and meeting virtually. But together, we want to just enjoy some time considering how do we motivate children to learn. And I want to invite us to just for a moment longer actually audit this car ride lesson against some principles from learning science. So a little context just about my own work before the Forest School. I worked for a national nonprofit in school redesign called Transcend. And we worked with district schools, charter networks, and independent schools all around the United States. And these are, I was a founding partner at that organization. I stepped off in the last few years. But these are some of the learning environments that I've had the opportunity to help design. Edgecombe County Public Schools is a rural school district in North Carolina that has built a micro school, not unlike the Forest School. And they are using that micro school to sort of transform education across their district. That little logo to the right of Edgecombe is the Brooklyn Steam Center and the Brooklyn Navy Yard that's has a focus on career readiness. The New York City Department of Education has a partnership with the Brooklyn Navy Yard to prepare high school graduates for jobs right out of high school. Whittle School and Studios is actually the most ambitious, expensive independent school ever made in the history of the world. And I had the opportunity to work on that design, which is just a fascinating experience. And a lot of different learning environments have had that chance to see and design, co-design, and launch. And in the process of our work at Transcend, one of the things that we found really helpful for school leaders, for educators, and for parents was, because in the last, few decades, we've learned a lot about learning and learning science and the brain and how adults and how children learn. And one of the things that we endeavored to do was to summarize, everything that we know to date into some just real simple principles that parents, educators, and school leaders can apply when they think about creating learning experiences for young people. And we called it Designing for Learning. And we published a few years ago Designing for Learning cards and a Designing for Learning primer. These are things that our staff at the Forest School are trained in. They're principles that we use to audit our own learning experiences at the school on a regular basis. And the headline, and I'm not going to get into all this, and you don't need to read everything here, but the headline is that, if you were to summarize everything that we know about learning, there's really 4 factors that impact learning for children. Cognition, which are sort of the processes, of processing, retrieving, and applying, learning, motivation, which is the focus of what we're talking about today, identity, which is, the person inputs, our gender, our race, our background, our experiences, and how that impacts our learning. And then lastly, individual variability. I mean, there really is no such thing as an average human. We all view the world in different, unique, beautiful ways. And deep learning accounts for that. So those are kind of the 4 factors that really impact learning. But motivation specifically, there are 4 principles around motivation. And one of them is value. It's that people learn best when they find the content, outcome, processes, and relationships that are associated with learning important and relevant. Like, is this valuable to me? Is the simplest way to put it. And so as designers of learning environments, whether we're parents or educators, some of the questions we can ask when we want to make sure our children are motivated, does this learning feel relevant to them, to their interests, to their goals? Does it feel compelling to them? Are they working with their peers and adults that they have meaningful relationships with? So what value does this have? So if you think about my car ride lesson, when it comes to value, do you think the car ride lesson honors or violates this learning science principle, and why? And I want to invite your genuine feedback. Do you think that by me having this lesson with Oswin, was this something that he valued? And so did this, was this lesson honoring or violating this principle of motivation? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that if he is going to spend any time in soccer, he needs to learn early that these 2 truths are true, that it can be rough and the refs aren't going to be fair, because if he spends his whole life blaming it on the ref, he's not going to have a lot of success. So I think that there's value. I mean, it's practical knowledge he needs to know that makes a difference.
Thanks, Sally. Any other thoughts? Do you think it honors or violates?
I think it's challenging because you don't really know what Oswin values. I mean, it sounds like he values justice and people abiding by the rules. So I think if you were having a discussion on that, then he would be more motivated. But maybe because what you were saying went against what he was motivated towards, then the success was not as great.
That's good. Yeah, just my take. He loves soccer, he loves competition, and he loves winning. And so in that sense, my lesson honored, I think, the principle because he saw it as valuable to talk about how might we win. But I agree with you, Kathy, that he also, I mean, knowing Oswin like I do, I mean, he does value justice big time, and to leave that out might actually violate this learning science principles. So that's one of the components of motivation. A second component is what's called constructive emotions, which is that people learn best when they are in constructive as opposed to destructive emotional states versus ones of excessive stress or anxiety. And so as parents or as educators, we try and design experiences to teach our children when it's a warm and joyful space. Where there's positive relationships between peers as well as between adults and learners. Does the environment support physical and psychological health and well-being? Does it help them diffuse negative emotional states? So given that, what do you think? Did my car ride lesson honor or violate this principle of constructive emotions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This phone. Okay. So I was been trying to talk. I finally figured out how to do my speaker. Yeah. So I think, and that was one of the things I think we mentioned earlier when you first asked the questions, was maybe when the upset was so fresh and new, to kind of wait until that diffused a little and then have that constructive conversation. Because I know, when I'm upset and when Tyler's upset, it's like you don't hear it. It's just like you're so in that moment, and maybe you don't really process the logic behind that conversation.
Thanks, Belinda. Any other thoughts? I agree. I think my car ride lesson violated this principle because he was frustrated, and so the timing was wrong. Had he not been frustrated, the timing could have been amazing, and a car ride lesson would have been awesome. So it makes you think even about carpool, like when you pick up learners at the end of the day, what's their emotional state, right? And what is when, if we want to teach them something in that moment, what needs to be true, what is the timing. A third principle for motivation is called self-efficacy, which is what we believe we're capable of. People learn best when they believe in their ability to grow and achieve mastery of what they're learning. So as parents and as educators, we ask, how can we design a learning experience that engages learners in doing something that's actually feasible, it's doable, but it's not too challenging, that helps them set goals and plan towards them and reflect on their progress, that frames failure as temporary, that can be changed by one's behavior, and that ensures that learners have trusted adults from whom they can seek help when they feel insecure about their abilities. And again, self-efficacy is the belief in what we're capable of doing. So what do you think? Do you think my car ride lesson honored or violated this principle? This one's a little tougher.
I'll go back to what I said initially about, soccer's tough, and, refs do have the ability to make different calls, right? Just based on who they are. That didn't necessarily speak to, in my opinion, Oswin's, his ability to grow or achieve mastery, right? That wasn't about him and what he did specifically in the game, or what he could have done better, or what he did do well, right? Around his kind of internal sense of self-efficacy. That was, it was more around externally, soccer's tough and refs can make the calls that they want.
Yeah, that's good. Any other opinions about whether or not my lesson honored or violated this principle?
I think it was a great learning opportunity. It was a great moment to learn. That's one thing that if you can ask my Tyler, whenever he makes a mistake, drops, a glass of milk or anything, instead of me getting upset about it, I say, this is a learning opportunity not to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the learning there for Oswin is you can get upset all you want about those things you can't control. But the lesson here is how you handle it, is how you react to it. I think there was a gentleman who said that earlier, is teaching children that you can get upset and be mad and be frustrated, but that doesn't change the situation. All that does is changes you and makes, makes it more difficult and stressful for you. So I think this was actually handled very well on the self-efficacy side, because it was a way for him to learn and grow. And the next time this happens, that's just the way it is. There's some level of acceptance in life, right? And that's a tough lesson to teach kids.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Belinda. Yeah. When I think about this one, I'm a little mixed. I mean, I agree. He and I have a good relationship, and so I'm that sort of trusted, safe space for him in this sense. And I agree that framing it as, hey, this is not the end of the world. It's a learning moment, like you said, Belinda, is powerful. But my lesson was absent of goals, and plans, and like helping him feel agency. And to be honest, like this makes me think maybe my lesson was a bit reactionary, and how could my lesson have been more proactive, maybe before one of these games. I mean, I knew he was going to be playing 9-on-9 for 90 minutes. I could have, knowing what I knew about soccer, I could have thought and predicted that there's going to be some rough games, you know, and so maybe we could have had this conversation earlier. This is kind of what this brings up for me. And then lastly, one of the last principle of motivation is that learners have a sense of control. People learn best when they perceive that they have meaningful and appropriate agency over their learning. And so we ask as parents and as educators, you know, how might we design learning experiences to provide an appropriate autonomy, freedom over when, where, and how learning is pursued, that we help them attain the supports and the resources needed to achieve their goals, and that we minimize, you know, barriers or challenges to their learning. So based on this principle, what do you think? Did my car ride lesson honor or violate this principle of sense of control? Did Oz have any sense of control when he was experiencing this lesson from me?
If I had to guess, I would think that he did not feel in control. And something else that's super impactful for our youth is how they feel they are looked at by their, you know, parents and other adults. And so I think that came into play as well. Sometimes I know, myself definitely included, and with the intent of doing good and helping them learn, I feel like my children often take my advice and criticism as just that, criticism, and it's hard to give them the lesson that goes with it without affecting their sense of self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that potentially happening in this situation. And it's hard to know at a young age what you can control and what you can't control. So if I had to guess, I would say that he probably did not feel like he had much control in that situation, and that it was things happening to him and not for him.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Kathy. Any other thoughts on this, whether my car ride lesson honored or violated Oswin's sense of control?
This is Morgan. I was thinking before, and this kind of goes back to one of your other points about timing, is, you know, when they're upset, their prefrontal cortex really isn't in charge. They're kind of in survival mode. So if you do the validate feelings thing first and just say, gosh, you know, that was awful, or, you know, I understand, or whatever. And then you can say, after you validated it and you've kind of turned their feelings into words, you can say, do you want to talk about this now, or would you like to talk about it later? And then that can give them some choice in terms of timing.
That's great. That's great, Morgan. Any other thoughts on this one?
Great. I'm going to use
I'm
that,
sorry.
Morgan.
Valerie?
Yes. I want to say that I actually think that he had a sense of control, because in the simplest form, he could have chose to ignore you. He could have chose not to answer you at all.
Yeah.
He could have chose to, you know, pretend like you weren't talking, but
Yep.
he listened, and then he wanted to answer, so he did.
Yeah, that's good. So there's some level, there's even degrees of control that you know, the children can be offered, you know. Whether I talk or when I talk about this, you know, are different. Well, thank you for doing what we just did, which is auditing, right, this car ride lesson, and showing me even more clearly all the ways it missed the mark, and a few ways that it was good. Thank you for the encouragement. But I agree it was imperfect. And, you know, just to kind of summarize what we've said here, when it comes to motivation specifically, you know, if you were to synthesize and summarize what we know to date about how to create learning environments and learning experiences where children are motivated to learn, there's really 4 things to think about. You know, do they value it? Do they feel and sense that they have self-efficacy? Do they feel like they are capable of doing the thing? Do they have a sense of control? And are they in a constructive emotional state at that moment? Any questions about this framework before I actually put us in breakout rooms for an activity? Any questions just for clarifying or probing?
Is this kind of the principles that the forest school uses?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We so as a team, we actually, one of the core practices that we do, Belinda and others, is we audit. We design learning experiences obviously every day for learners, and then we as a team practice auditing those learning experiences against these learning science principles, not just motivation, but also individual variability, cognition, and all the factors. In fact, we have a set of cards that we use to do it with, and we ask the question: does this learning experience violate or honor this learning science principle? And if we discover as a team or as an individual that part of the learning experience violates the principle, then we make adjustments. We don't do this for every single learning experience because that would take way too much time. But what we do is we do it often with our team, so that they themselves are kind of building their own muscles at designing learning environments that are aligned with these learning science principles. But these, without a doubt, are our North Star when it comes to designing for deep learning. Any other questions? All right, so now it's your turn. You all, or a lot of you, put in the chat or thought about something you want to teach your child soon in the future. Well, my question is, what's your plan? How are you going to do that? And I want to invite you to go into breakout rooms. I'll put you in there in just a minute with 3 or 4 other folks, and just kind of take turns sharing something you want to teach your child this weekend. And what's your plan to do it? Or or if you don't have a plan, that's fine. But like, how might you do it? What's your early thought on how you might teach this lesson to your child, whatever it is? Could be a character, could be about cooking. And then as a group, kind of brainstorm together, like, how can you ensure that they value it? How can you promote constructive emotions for this experience? How can you promote self-efficacy? And then how can you give a sense of control? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to drop in the Zoom chat a link to this activity, so you guys can actually see those questions and have the principles there with you for when you go into your breakout room. But before I send you there, if you will, go ahead and click on it. So just to make sure you have access. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to form the breakout rooms. Any questions about the prompt? So it's gonna, again, it's gonna require a few of you, at least 1 or 2 of you, to sort of step up and share, hey, here's a lesson I want to teach this weekend. Here's what I'm thinking. And then you guys can kind of workshop that. I'll be the timekeeper. We'll do about 15 minutes. And then I'll bring you back for some final discussion and some announcements. All right, I've created the breakout rooms. I want to invite you to, you should see a button on there to join. See you in a bit. Linda, do you see the button to join?
Trying to get back. There it is.
Lindsay, Brian, Jalea, Katira, Daniel, do y'all see the button to join? A few quick announcements before we head out. I drop them in the chat here. One is friendly reminder, there is an extrinsic motivator happening at the school right now. It's a competition to see which learners and which studios can make the most badge plan progress before the end of the year. This is the only time we're going to do this this year as a school. In fact, this is the only time we're going to have points for our youngest learners in Spark, ages 5 through 7, all year long. It's generally, I think, best not to introduce too many extrinsic motivators for youngest learners too early. But this is one moment in the year where we'll do it for the next couple weeks, but we won't for the rest of the year. But there'll be prizes for the studio that makes the most progress, the learner within each studio that makes the most progress, the learner within each studio who helps and inspires other heroes the most, and then the learner who makes the most progress across the whole school will be head of school for a day in January of 2021, which hopefully be fun for them. Also, we've got badge ceremonies that are happening today and next week. In fact, today's elementary, and I'm going to Facebook Live that on our private parents Facebook page. If you're an elementary parent and want to see that, I'll be speaking for the first 10 minutes, and then Amber will be giving out badges. But that's a ceremony that's kind of fun for the learners. Children's Business Fair on December 12th. Kathy, are you still on? Is there anything you want to say about that? If not, I can make the announcement.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm in the car, but yes. So I just wanted to remind everybody that the Children's Business Fair is coming. It's a week from Saturday, and we are so excited. We've been doing a lot of work to get the things together that our kids will need for their success. And you may have been receiving some emails from Marcy Hoffman. There is a deadline today at noon to have the form filled out that she sent out to everybody. So if you all can look in your emails and please have your learner, or perhaps you could help them filling out that form. She needs that so that she can print the programs for the event. Also, the day of the event, we may need some help breaking down some tables at the end. So if you're interested in helping, please let us know. And what was the other one? Stand by just a second. Oh, please mark it. Let's get the word out for this event so that our kids can really get lots of customers and have such a great experience. Marcy put on the parent Facebook site a splash page that you can copy and add to your own Facebook sites to spread the word, or Instagram, or however you do social media. If we can get the word out, then it'll just make the event that much better. And let me see. The last thing is Marcy will be emailing. I feel like I'm like, Marcy. Marcy will be emailing everybody to let them know if they still owe a registration fee for the event. So be on the lookout for that as well. Does anybody have any questions about the Children's Business Fair?
Looks like no questions. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
And then lastly, a friendly reminder, our last exhibition of 2020 will be virtual. And we're going to invite families for a maker challenge. You'll have a chance to choose with your learner to cook a dish of a particular culture, or design a cultural symbol together, or build something that represents a culture, or do some other maker task together to kind of deepen learning. So we're excited about that. And thanks so much again for being here this morning. And y'all enjoy the rest of your day.